Origin channel, Somro Rex, and this is the history of paper money, origins of exchange, extra history, part 1 by the channel Extra Credits. Giant stones sunk under the sea, cows, cowrie shells, what do they all have in common? They were all money. Find out how we got from exchanging these things to doing 8 hours of work for a stack of paper that takes 2 seconds to print on a history of paper money. So, first of all, money has a value, paper money has a value because we think it has a value. Society thinks it has a value, so it has a value. That's how, Bitcoin exploded. So basically, before it was like gold, silver, something, valuable. I don't know, like he says here, if something you find under the sea, like pearls and things. So if it is a rarity, people want it. If people want it, it has a, value because people want it. So, gold became something like that. People wanted gold, it's shiny and whatever. So, somebody was willing to pay a certain amount of bread or whatever tradable goods for it. And that became a norm. Like, this is how much gold is worth. And it became a currency like that. Before that, people used to trade, right? Like, certain people wants bread. What you willing to give me, instead of that? I have a certain sack of grain or something. Right, I have some jewelry with me that you want. So it was just trading. Then paper money came. Paper money just means the society that this paper money belongs to. The society owes you some goods, some trading back. That's what the money means. Like I sold certain amount of bread to somebody, right? Like say, I don't know, a sack full of bread to somebody. In exchange of that, they give me certain paper money. Like the society owes me that paper money worth of trading. Like anything I want. So I go with that paper money and buy, I don't know, jewelry or something. Now, the guy who's selling jewelry sees that money and realizes, oh, wait a minute, society owes this guy this amount of things because he has that money because he probably sold something, so I'm going to take that. Now, society owes me that amount of something, so I can go somewhere else and buy something else. So it made trading easier. Like you don't have to, say, I have 2 sacks of grain here and I want jewelry. Let's bargain, let's think about this. No, currency made it easier. So yeah. Let's do this one. Extra Credits is a great channel. I love reacting to this channel. Everything they go into detail. It's always fun. Remember, if you like my reaction, don't like and subscribe. Check out the reaction. There's a link in the description. Check out the cards over place. Check out the end cards in there. Let's watch it.
How did humanity come to accept rectangular pieces of pulped trees as something to spend 8 to 10 hours a day working for? It's a pretty insane story. This change from hard currency like gold or silver is a really huge deal. Without it, we couldn't possibly have the massive industrial and post-industrial economies we know today. This change revolutionized how we do business, and forever altered how governments were financed. Learning about this massive sea change in how we, as a species, thought about money can help us reflect on our current historical shift from seeing paper as money to seeing bits, seeing digital ones and zeros as money. But before we can get to the exciting story of people trying to convince other people that paper was worth something, to understand why this is such a huge deal, we have to discuss a bit about how we thought about money before paper. If we go way back to the beginning of society, we find trade. Before early humans even really settled down, there's evidence that when we met, we exchanged things we had made or things we'd found. But as soon as humans started to cultivate the earth and—
This is the most commonsensical thing, right? Oh, look at that, you have apple. I want that apple. Do you want that apple? No, I just have an excess. I have many apples. So you want an apple. So what you're willing to give me instead? Oh, look at that. I found this pearl that's shiny. You want that? Yeah, I like that. So there you go. Trading, exchange. Yeah.
Formed societies, we started to specialize, and that meant that we not only loved to trade, we had to. Now, often when we think of trade, we think of long-distance trade. We think of caravans loaded with exotic goods. But for our story, we have to talk about local trade. Because here's where we run into the problem of coincidence of wants. Or rather, we run into it everywhere, but if we fail to solve this problem at the local level, society breaks down, and we can't have the specialized trades we need to run anything beyond the smallest gathering of people. So, what is a coincidence of wants? It's the basis on which trade can exist. Let's say that I make shirts, and you grow food.
Yeah.
Well, if you want a shirt and I want food, awesome, we can trade. But if I don't want you—
Exactly, I was about to say that. I mean, trading is essential, right? Say there's a blacksmith who makes swords and armors or whatever. He can't eat sword, right? He needs food, so he's gonna go, meets a farmer or something. Like you have grain. A farmer has grain. Now he also wants, I don't know, sword to defend. He can't make a sword. He's not a blacksmith. So, certain things are, essential basically. Like I make certain things, not everything. I can't be best at everything. So I'll go to the people who are best at something and trade.
Your stupid food, or if you're all full up on shirts, well, we can't trade, can we? And that starts becoming a real problem for society if
Yeah.
I want food, but you don't want my shirts. Maybe I can find somebody with some third
There
good
you
that
go.
you do want, but that means that a lot of time is consumed by trading, and if I can't find some other good you want to trade for, well, there's gonna be trouble. And this problem runs even deeper than we sometimes think about when you consider the lack of refrigeration and transportation. Imagine I'm a fisherman and you're a farmer, and let's say that we want to trade. Well, there's this problem. Your harvest only comes in once a year. I can't trade you for a harvest you don't have yet, and all of those extra fish I caught today are going to be pretty rotten by the time your harvest comes in. And while this may seem like a very specific example, trade
it's
for
not.
food was probably the most prevalent trade.
It's not a specific example, right? It implies everywhere. Interest doesn't necessarily align, right? Like the same example I just gave, it felt weird to me. Like farmer wants a sword, but there you go. Farmer says, "What do I have a need for a sword?" But blacksmith but I make swords and I want food. What you do? So he's gonna go to somebody like soldiers or whatever who needs swords. Those soldiers are gonna I don't know, give something to somebody. Those people are gonna give something to somebody, and those people are gonna come back to the farm and give them. It's a circle of trading, but you can track all that. So you have money basically. Money just means society owe you that, so you don't have to run away. You can just exchange money.
Of the ancient world. So we need to find a third good that we both want that we can trade for. But wouldn't it be convenient if there was some universal third good which everybody wanted and would trade for, so we didn't have to do some long chain of bartering every time we wanted something? Enter money. All money is a third good that doesn't spoil and that we all agree has value, thus becoming a unit of exchange, an intermediary good by which all other goods can be traded.
Basically, this makes everybody's trading goods is goods of society, right? Like somebody sells a fish, they get money from that society. So that society realize that you have value because you have fish that somebody can eat in that society. So you just get this money basically. That just means society owes you that much money, that much trading in return. So you go to anybody from that society and give that money. The person knows that, oh, look at that, this money is from this society and I can use that money to buy anything I want. So it makes much easier things.
And while we often think of coins made of precious metals for this purpose, the truth is, so long as it's durable enough and hard enough to procure,
Yeah.
anything can serve as money. Tangent time. Turns out we have used a lot of weird stuff as money over our history. For example, cattle have often served as money. I mean, they're fairly durable, they last for years, they're practical, and they're reasonably scarce. When Europeans arrived in the Americas, alcohol often served as currency. You could literally drink your paycheck. Cigarettes have often become money of prisons and POW camps. Back in ancient China, money in the shape of tools and then knives
Bottle caps could be work as money, right?
became some of the first examples of precious metal money. And, my personal favorite, on the island of Yap, gigantic limestone donuts serve as money. They are so
Why not?
huge that once they are brought to the island, no one even moves them. They just remember who owns which ones. In fact, all of these stones had to be quarried off-island because there's no naturally occurring limestone on Yap. And once, when a crew was coming back from a quarrying expedition, a storm hit and sent their stone to the bottom of the ocean. But the crew survived and told everybody what had happened, and
Alright, one might think that's stupid, why would you do that? But then again, source of money has to be specific and rare in a way, right? Like gold is rare, something like that, or something of value like booze and I don't know, a cow that you can't just find. Like somebody would think, why would you need that big ass limestone? Just use any common thing as money. That would be easier, right? No, it's not. Because the money is supposed to symbolize that how much society owes to a certain person. Anybody just walk off and find similar things just sitting on the ground, like a simple rock, and they're like, oh, look at that, that's money. No, it's not. You didn't trade anything. How is supposed to filter out like who traded what and what is money? If it's as common, anybody can just take money from anywhere, even though they didn't trade anything. So money had to be either useful or rare. So when a person gets it, It symbolized the guy probably traded something for it.
And the islanders decided that, it still counted. So, to this day, somebody owns that giant piece of stone money at the bottom of the sea. And even though it's not really in use today, for hundreds of years that stone was used to buy and sell things, even though no one had ever seen it. Giving Yap, in some ways, one of the most forward-thinking monetary systems before the modern era.
Yeah, land.
But if we want to talk about the...
It's like anybody buys a land and sells the land. It's kind of similar, even though land is useful too. But you understand, like, I can't see the stone. But now I sell you the stone. It's yours. Now you have the stone. Next time you can sell it. So it's a currency, but like how people sell and buy lands, basically.
King of them all, the form of money that has been used the longest and over the widest expanse of the globe, we have to talk about one thing. Nope, not gold, although in fairness, that's what I would have guessed too. Nope, it's the cowrie shell. It's durable, impossible to counterfeit, and without modern harvesting techniques, it's not so easy to acquire that inflation will run rampant. Anyway, tangent over, back on target, we have lots of different possible types of pre-modern money, including the gold and silver coins that we so often think of when we think of money of the past. But all of these different types of money have one thing in common. They are what we call commodity money, because their value is in the commodity themselves. Even cowries were seen as rare and beautiful and could be used for jewelry and the like, and so were thought of as having intrinsic value, the same way we feel gold has an intrinsic value for its scarcity and its uses. Now that makes a lot of sense for a currency. It feels secure and reasonable.
Yeah, the gold and diamond thing is gonna go into shit when people start to mine asteroids, right? Yeah, rare earth elements are only rare on Earth.
You can trust to the worth of that gold coin in your hand. I mean, after all, if you're used to trading one thing for another, why would you ever trade something valuable like a horse for something worthless like a pile of paper?
Yeah, you
but
can't
for
cut
gold
off the
or
horse.
For cowries, well, that's another story. But when your economy grows, this system starts showing some of its limits. For one thing, commodity money is heavy. If you're doing massive deals, it gets really hard to transport, and it's risky to transport across lawless lands. Commodity money is also often subject to debasing, where somebody, usually the person who should be responsible for making sure the currency maintains its value, waters down the whiskey, or takes a gold coin, melts it down, and reforges it with a bit less gold in it, and passes it off as worth.
Or maybe cut off the sides of the gold and making the coin smaller and smaller, so they have to put grooves in the coin to make sure nobody cuts it off.
Worth the same amount. But more than anything, when you get to gigantic economies, the very scarcity that makes commodity money seem to have value becomes your enemy. Like, let's take gold and silver. What happens when your economy grows to the point where you just can't get enough of it? We actually saw the effects of this in our episode on the Opium Wars, where so much English silver was ending up in China in exchange for tea, it was actually causing inflation and hampering basic economic transactions at home. And this really comes into effect when
that is true, right? If you have any rarity as a currency, it only has a value as far as it's a rarity. If you just pile it up, people like, yeah, look, there's a gold. Yeah, I have a bunch of them there. What am I supposed to do with that? There you go. The value just plummeted like that, inflation.
Get to more modern government finance and the financing of war. What happens to a nation when it has to make a sudden drastic uptick in its spending but can't get enough specie to cover its cost, even from those who are willing to lend? As I am sure we will see in future Extra History episodes, it plays havoc with an economy, and even the ability to prosecute a war. And the reverse of this is true as well. Currencies based on scarcity are often subject to changes in the scarcity of the commodity on which they're based, which can be trouble when somebody finds a lot more of your currency commodity. When Spain started to import massive amounts of silver and gold from the Americas, all the precious metal-based currency in Europe started to suffer from inflation. After all those gold coins weren't worth nearly as much since somebody had just dumped a huge new pile of gold on European shores. And as a government or even a financial sector, when someone digging up a new pile of minerals means that you can't control your own fiscal policy, that's bad news. But those disadvantages are only easy to see if you're a head of state or working on the largest scale transactions. If you're just some average person in the streets, when some well-to-do says that they want to take your grain in exchange for this nice slip of... is that paper? Well, you would be forgiven for thinking that you smell a rat. Join us next time as we finally delve into the origins of paper money and start to address this
problem. Yeah, but let's say if you're living in a kingdom, basically, so there would be a king or emperor or whatever, who has to just come out and claim that this is money. We recognize as this currency rather than spending gold. So we as a society owes you a certain amount of things if you have this certain amount of paper money. So this is like trading. It's just like a debt, right? Like I sold lots of grain. Now what? No, nobody has anything that could give me that. So I guess I'm gonna give you tons of paper money. So next time you want anything from that particular society, go there and give that paper money. They'll accept that. It makes things easier. But yeah, the commodity thing is true. Like inflation hits things, really bad way. And what that does is, let's say somebody just find a tons of gold somewhere and just brought it on a ship, thinking, "Oh, look at that, I'm rich." Now the people who basically traded that grain and bread and whatever for certain amount of gold, now that gold is worth less. So they just, common people, suffered a massive loss because inflation happened, but they still have the same gold they got just few days ago, but their gold is worth less now. So when they go to somebody else, like say clothes shop, a shoe shop, they can't buy the same amount they would have just few days ago, but they still traded that amount of grain or whatever they had. So they suffered a massive loss. So paper money makes things easier, right? Everything has a certain value, and that value translates into this paper money. Everybody can get paper money and exchange it. It literally transformed the world, I guess. Alright, people, that was history of paper money, origins of exchange, extra history part 1. Wait a minute, is there something else?
Problem of people fearing to give up their outdated gold.
That's it. But extra credits, this is a great topic. Nobody really tackles that. No proper history channel that I'll come across who talks about paper money. So this is good, I guess. It's fun. There are more parts of this, obviously. I can see second now, number if there is more or not. But yeah, I'll see you next time.